And we are back. What is up, everybody? We're getting into the bread and butter of this playlist. I'm super excited. So this playlist is all about learning Git and source control. And so far, we have cloned our repo, committed to our repo. We have staged changes, we have stashed changes, and then in the last video, we learned how to push and pull changes. One thing that we have not yet done that is crucial to version control is branching. So in this video, we're going to talk about branching, which is literally taking our code base and branching it so there's literally another version of our code base. The main version and the branched version are going to exist simultaneously. So by having a second version of my code base, I can now make a bunch of changes in that branch that don't affect the main version. So I can go and build a feature, I can experiment with some code, and when I'm ready to take those changes and actually put them back into the main version of my project, I will merge them in. So firstly, we're going to branch to a side branch, and then we're going to merge back into the main branch. So this video is going to be all about how to branch and then how to merge. Just like everything else in this playlist, we're going to learn the basics in this video, and then we're going to use this for all of the videos upcoming. So I don't expect you guys to be experts at branching right now, but let's learn the basics now so that the next bunch of the videos, we can get into the flow of knowing when and how to branch, and then when and how to merge. There is no limit to the number of branches that you can create. This is very much just a tool for you to manage your code and the versions of your project. So branch when you want, branch when you need to. The purpose here is for you to be more productive when you're writing and building new features. Welcome back, everyone. We are again here in our source control project. We've made a lot of commits so far in this project. We started with some basic commits, then we moved to some better commits. Then we talked a little bit about staging and unstaging. We talked about stashing and pushing and pulling. And in the last video, we actually did one pull where it actually automatically merged changes because we were out of date. We were out of sync with the remote repo. And when we pulled it, it merged a version for us, and then we pushed that version to the remote repo. I want you guys to ignore that the colors have changed here because I just have multiple GitHub accounts. That's why these icons look different. Yours probably look the same. If you're working in a project with other people, every person's little icon will be different. So you'll be able to very easily tell who did which commit. In this video, we're going to look at branching. And so branching is exactly what it sounds like. You can branch off of the main branch. So again, I'm going to pull up this diagram here. Master is main. It's called main now. Some people used to call it master, but the main branch is green. And so right now, just pretend like all of these commits don't exist. And we're just on this initial commit here, this one master branch. That's where we're at here, the main. We're at the main point of the main branch. The main branch is going to be literally our master branch. This is where everything that is push to production wants to be. It's going to be our master source of truth. So most of the time when we're writing code, we do not commit to the master or main branch directly. So far, all of these commits have been into our main branch. And I think if you're just starting, if you're doing your own project, you can commit to main. That's totally fine. But in a bigger app, a production app or a bigger team, you're going to have a main branch and then you're going to have other side branches. And people are going to do their personal work on the side branches. And then when it's ready to go, we'll merge it into the main branch or a release branch. So most of the time, you're not actually working on the main branch. You're working in another branch. And then eventually, when it's finalized, when it goes to the users, we'll merge it into the main branch. We're going to talk a lot more about this when we get into Git flow towards the end of this playlist. But for right now, I just want you guys to understand that there are branches. There's a master or a main branch, but most of the time what's going to happen is we're going to branch, then we're going to do all of our work over here. And then when we're done, we're going to merge that back into the main branch. So that's how it works. So let's start by just creating our first branch. I'm going to come into Xcode. Let's do it in Xcode first. So right now I can see that I'm on the main branch. You can see it right here. And what I can do is I can go to the main branch, I can click this ... and I can create a new branch from the main branch. So literally just like we saw in the diagram, we're going to create a branch. It's exactly what we're doing in Xcode. We can also go to the source control navigator, right click on the main, and new branch. Creating new branch. Now there are naming conventions that go into creating a new branch, but for right now, I'm just going to call this my second branch. When I name branches, I generally don't want to do spacing in here. I don't want special characters in here. Let's just keep this simple. So let's just keep it simple. So right now, my second branch, that's fine. We're going to talk about naming conventions in a second. So let's create this branch. And now I can see here, well, this is not updated. Hold on. Let's switch to this branch. I should already be on it. I don't know why it didn't. Xcode source control can get a little funky sometimes, but I am now on my second branch. This is the current branch that we were on, not the main branch. And I can see up here my second branch. So I know exactly the branch that I'm on. And when I click between these, I can see they actually have the same exact commit history because it's the same thing right now. I didn't actually add anything to the second branch that's not on the main branch. When I look at GitKraken, I can see this as well. I can see main branch as well as my second branch. And you're going to notice that there's a little icon for my GitHub account on the main branch and not on my second branch. So what that's telling me is that my second branch right now is local only, and it is not remote. If I look at the remote repo down here, I can see the main branch is there, but there is no my second branch. So my second branch must clearly be local only. So oftentimes, as soon as I create a branch, I also want to just push it up to GitHub. So let's tell the remote repo that we now have a second branch and that this does exist. So while we're on my second branch, let's push it up to the remote repo. You're going to see here, it actually says create. It literally knows this branch is not in the remote repo and it's going to have to create it at this time. So let's go ahead and push that up. Let's look at GitKraken and we can see both are now on both local and remote. You can also see it over here on my remote also now has my second branch. So if I open up GitHub again, I go back to my repo here, I should be able to actually see two branches. So there's two branches in this file, the main branch, as well as my second branch. So I can click this here, or I can click and look at all the branches. This is a nice view because this tells us the active branches, because sometimes there's stale branches. Imagine you made a branch, forgot about it, you forgot about this project, nobody touched this branch in 8 months. Well, it still exists, but it's now stale. This is a nice little tab of, if you have a large project with a lot of team members, you can come in here and you can see what are the active branches. And you can see who is actually working on these branches. So you can see, okay, here's the 5 branches that this person's working on and this person's working on and this person's working on. And then you can see how far ahead or behind are they from the main branch. So we can see right now my second branch is in line with the main branch because it's not ahead or behind at all. Let's jump into Xcode. Let's do some work on my second branch. I'm going to come down here and let's say subscribe now. Let's Option Command C. And I want to call this a feature. Let's say subscribe now added back. And let's stage it. Let's commit it. And now I can see that we've committed this to my second branch. So my second branch has one commit in it. Let's do one more. Let's come back into here. Let's delete this. Let's make this Swiftful Thinking again. Let's again do a feature and say Swiftful Thinking text updated. I can see the uncommitted changes in my source control on this branch. I can stage it. I can commit it. I can see there's now 2 commits on this branch. So I can see here that my second branch is 2 commits ahead of my second branch in the remote version. So if I look here, I can see not only is main here, but the remote version of my second branch is still down here because we haven't pushed it up to GitHub. So this is actually 2 commits ahead of the remote version of my second branch. Okay. So when I'm looking at GitHub here, my second branch, this is not the same ahead or behind as this. So this is my second branch relating to my remote second branch. For example, let's take this and let's push it up to GitHub. Push. My second branch now is in line, not with main, but it's in line with the remote version of my second branch. I can see that here, right? Both it's local and it's remote at this level. If I look at GitHub and I refresh this, I can see that my second branch is 2 commits ahead, not of my second branch, but of main. So this is now 2 commits ahead of the main branch. And this is really helpful because you can see roughly, is this branch in front or behind? Is it really old? Is it really new? Let's jump back into Xcode. All right, so this is generally the workflow. It's right, I branch off of the main, I'm going to do some work, and then eventually I'm ready to merge this work back into the main branch. But what's cool, while I have these 2 branches created, I can switch between them. So I can actually, in GitKraken, I can just double click on main here and switch to the main branch. I'm going to double click and switch back. I can also in Xcode just right click and switch. If you're on an old version of Xcode, this is actually called checkout. This is actually checking out the other branch. Think about it like checkout at a grocery store, but we're going to switch to the main branch, and let's switch. And I can see here now I'm on the main branch. I'm going to switch back to my second branch. Let's switch back. And now this time what I'm going to do is actually, let's write some code here. So maybe I wanted to add another rectangle. And let's just pretend, for example's sake, my manager comes in and says, hey, Nick, stop what you're doing. I need you to go look at the code that's in production and tell me how this analytic works. What does this code do? Or what does that function do? So for example's sake, I want to see the version that is on the main branch, right? So I want to switch to the main branch to see that code. But when I go to switch, I'm going to get this other message here, stash changes. And this is why I covered stash changes first, because we can't switch from our branch to the other branch if we have outstanding changes. Because it needs to know, what are you going to do with these changes? Do I discard them forever? Do I stash them somewhere? So I can now stash these changes and then switch, or I could discard these changes and then switch, or I can let Xcode do it for me. I can just right click and switch. And when it asks me, I'll just put here, adding second rectangle, and stash and switch at the same time. So now it's created my stash for me, and it switched me onto the main branch. So now when I go back to my second branch, let's switch back. I can now apply my stash, apply stash changes. And I don't need this stash. I'm going to delete it after. So let's just apply. Cool. Now we're back to where we were. One more time, I'm going to do it on GitKraken. And so now I have that change. I'm going to switch to main, and it doesn't let me. It says stash or commit your changes first. It's exactly what we just talked about. So let's stash our changes, stash them here, and then let's switch branches. And now we are switched. And we can see here that that stash was added back up here, right? Again, let's just go back in here and let's switch back to the my second branch. So we learned about creating branches and switching branches. And then we're going to wrap up this video with some light merging. So after I've made all of my progress on this branch, maybe I'm building a new feature, maybe I'm just doing something else, I'm now ready to merge this back into the main repo. Because chances are, all of the developers on my team are working off this same base main case, but the other devs on my team have no idea what I'm doing in this branch. They can see my commits, but they're not building this feature. So they're probably on their own branches and doing their own work. And so at some point, we're going to have to merge all of our changes together to a final product. So I want to merge my second branch into the main branch. I'm going to go back into Xcode. While I'm on my second branch, I'm going to right click and I'm going to click merge. I could also come up here. I can click main and then I can go to merge and I can go here and I can click. This is actually not what we want. So this is the reverse. So this is merging main into my second branch. We want to merge my second branch into main. So merge main into my second branch is actually incorrect. Let's check out the main branch. And I want to merge my second branch into main. Again, when I look at our diagram, that diagram that I had here, right now we're over here and we're trying to merge it into the main branch. So it's not that we want the main branch to come over here. We want here to come into the main. So let's go let's go and do one real quick. Let's right click, merge my second branch into main. Are you sure you want to merge? Changes will be merged, merge. Boom. All right, and just like that, my second branch is now merged into main. I can see it better in GitKraken. I can see main is now up here. So I've taken these commits and I've put them onto the local version of the main branch. Now again, let's recognize that main locally versus main remotely. So we've merged them locally, but not remotely. And that's why main is now 2 commits ahead of the remote repo. So let's make sure every time we're doing these things that we actually push it, integrate and push it up to GitHub so that we keep our GitHub in line as well. So now we're all back up here. Generally speaking, after you merge, you don't really need that branch anymore, so you can delete it. So in GitKraken, I can just delete my second branch and origin my second branch. So the difference here is origin is the remote version and this original non-origin is the local version. So I could delete the branch locally and remotely or one or the other. And in Xcode, I don't need it anymore. I'm just going to right click and delete this branch. And do you want to delete the branch? It will be removed from the repo, delete. Cool. Let's also delete this stash because we don't need that anymore. Clean up our source control a little bit. And now we're back to just having a main branch. You will notice though that Xcode did not delete the remote branch. So eventually we'll want to open up GitHub and go into our branches and then delete the branch. So a lot of the time you're going to do merges in GitHub itself. So you'll be able to delete that branch automatically when you merge through GitHub. The reason for that is because a lot of merges are going to require pull requests. But we're going to cover pull requests in a future video. It needs its own video. So we're going to work on doing that in a future video. Right now, let's just talk about branching and merging, keeping it simple. We've branched and then we merged. And now that we've deleted that branch, let's pull updates in case there are any updates. And it looks like we need to still somehow delete the origin version. And we're back to our clean source control project here. So you'll notice that even though we branched and then merged it, I actually don't even see that branch anymore. And so I want to point out here that when we merged this, we added those commits, these 2 commits, to our main branch history. So we can't even see that there was a branch here anymore. That branch has disappeared. All we see is the commits that are left over from that merge. And again, this is why commits start to get important, because if you're merging into main or you're merging into other people's branches, these are going to appear into the same history that they are now seeing. It's not going to look like dev branch. It's going to look like commit, commit, commit. So it's obviously important that we write good commit messages. Let's get some practice in it. Let's create a couple branches here. So I can actually right click and create branches in GitKraken itself. But generally, I do these through Xcode. So right now in Xcode, I am on the main branch. Let's right click and create a new branch. So I'm going to pretend like I'm going to add a new screen here. So let's call this one feature add. Let's call this add explore view. Let's go ahead and click create on that. We have a new branch and let's add it, right? Let's open up, let's right click, create a new file, SwiftUI view. Let's call this explore view, click create. And in here, let's now just option command. Let's make it a feature and say add explore view. Let's stage that change. Let's commit that change. I can see that change here in GitKraken. It's not pushed to the remote. So let's make sure that we push it to the remote repo. Add feature. Cool. So we have this branch. We added the new explore view. I can see it here. It is pushed to the remote repo. But maybe your product manager comes in and says, hey, Nick, I know you're working on the explore view right now, but actually we need you to switch to the main branch and add some analytics for something else. And that's a higher priority. We want to stop what we're doing and do that. All right. Well, I don't want to delete this. I'm going to want to come back to this. So let's switch to the main branch. Come back in Xcode. Let's switch to the main branch. All right. I'm on the main branch now. From the main branch, let's make another branch and let's say add, not new. New is not a good descriptive word. Add home analytics, let's say. Let's click create. Now, again, this is locally only and is not remote. So let's make sure that we integrate and push it up to the remote repo. Let's create it on the remote repo. I can now see it in GitKraken as well. I can see the remote repo here. And let's go ahead and add those analytics. So I'm just going to the home view and let's just say maybe up here and let's analytics. I'm not going to actually do it, but let's Option Command C and then let's say feature, add home analytics. Stage it, commit it, push it up to the remote repo. Your manager comes in and says, hey, Nick, I know you're adding this analytics. Turns out there's actually a crash in the app and we need to fix that real quick. All right, let me go to the main version of my app, switch back to main. There's a crash. Where's the crash? Crash is on the content view. Okay, it looks like I need to change, this. Let's right click, create a new branch. Let's say fix user subscribe crash. I don't know what the crash is. I'm just making this up, guys. From here, let's make sure that we're pushing this to the remote repo. Let's integrate and push. You don't always have to push it remotely. I like to just because I have a second backup. And now let's fix our code. Let's take this out maybe. Let's fix it. We're fixing something that's live in production. So let's say patch, say fix subscribe button. This is not actually a crash, obviously, but we're mocking it up. Let's push it to the remote repo. And so let's jump back into GitKraken. And this again is why I start to really like GitKraken, because you can literally see in different colors the different branches. And when you get into really complex repos with lots of other people, you can see everyone's username. You can see all the branches. The branches are color coded. And so it gets really helpful versus in Xcode, this is what we have. And we can see the changes. We can see the different branches, but it's really hard to see at a high level the timeline of these branches. If they were out of date with the remote, we would have those little numbers here, but even that's not really telling us that much. Anyway, we now have a bunch of different branches and let's get some practice merging them in. So switch back to main. I'm on the main branch now. Let's first merge in our subscribe branch. So let's right click and merge fix user crash into main. Hopefully it works. Add subscribe button is now in this commit history. And let's also do it for the analytics. Let's say merge analytics into main and merge that. Cool. Let's check that it worked. Let's push main back up to GitHub because now these changes, these merges have not been pushed to GitHub yet. So I can see here, this is where my main branch is. And I can see that home analytics is merged in to the main branch. I can also see that fix user crash is in the history of the main branch, right? It looks a little different because it doesn't have this curve in it, but this was merged as well as this was merged. The order that this is in is based on chronological order. So if you look at the timeline of the main branch, right, it's this commit, this commit. This one was created at this time, but then this one was created after that. Then we merged this one first into the main branch, and this one merged second main branch. Anyway, let's push that up to GitHub so we have that remotely. And while we do that, we don't need these other two anymore. So I'm going to delete both of the ones that I've merged. Let's right click and delete the local and the remote version. Same thing for the analytics. Cool. We still have this version that we haven't added. Add explore view. So again, this is another example of Xcode did not update with the updates we just made in GitKraken. I'm going to close Xcode. I'm going to restart it real quick. Hopefully the source control refreshes now and we have just the add explore view on this screen here. There's a couple more things we're going to do before we end up this video. Firstly is we just created a couple branches, but you notice that those branches were all just listed out here. There was the main branch, there was the feature branch, but you can imagine if you have 50 engineers on the team, everyone's creating their own branches. And you can imagine that even just you are going to create more than one branch. For every feature I add, I'm going to create a new branch. For every bug I fix, I'm going to create a new branch. For every X, I'm going to create a new branch. So each person could have a lot of branches. So a lot of teams, especially larger teams, what they'll do is when you create a branch, you'll actually add in here a folder name. So I'm going to use my initials. A lot of teams will use their initials, NS. Let's call this add some feature and click create. So now all the branches with NS are going to be in this NS folder. So it's no different than making a regular branch. It doesn't look the different in source control, but in Xcode, it helps to keep the branches organized by developer. So large teams everyone will have their own initials here, and then all of your branches will be in your little folder. For example, let's create another one. And this time I'm even going to branch off of, add some feature. Let's create a new branch. And again, let's add the NS and we'll say second, let's call this my second feature. I like to use underscores here. You can name these however you want. I would avoid special characters and spaces. Click create. So now you can see that all of my branches are in the same folder. So this is how a lot of teams will do it, especially if developers are working independently. If I'm working on these, I can see my branches here. If somebody else is working, they'll have their own branch with their own folder and their own branches in it. But then there's other times where maybe a bunch of developers are working on the same feature. So maybe it's not that I'm working on my own branch, it's that 5 devs are working on the same feature. So when we go to create that one, let's create that one. We'll use a folder called features and then feature or features. And then we'll just say some new feature and click create. So now everything for feature development will go into this folder. And let's create another one here. Let's say branch, new branch, and then we'll say releases. Let's say release maybe 1.0.0. We're going to cover releases in a future video. We're not actually doing it. But anytime I make a branch that I'm going to then release, I can put that in the releases folder. So I can kind of start to organize my branches as well. So some teams will do the developer initials. Some teams will do it by features. I could even make sub branches of this. I could say here, so maybe I make a new branch. Let's branch off current and let's say feature / let's call it new onboarding flow / add first screen. Great. So now I have a feature folder where I'm going to put all of my features. Inside that will be a folder for each feature. So onboarding will be a feature, and then all the branches relating to new onboarding will be in this folder. So again, it does not matter how you want to structure your folders. What's important is that you're staying organized, because the larger your team gets, the more branches there's going to be, the more structure you're going to need to have. And a lot of bigger teams are going to have, again, a methodology. Just like there was a method to creating and writing these commit messages, teams will have rules for how and when you should branch. All right, go back to GitKraken. I can see all of these are in line. I actually don't need any of these. So what I'm going to do is just delete them all. Let's switch back to the main branch. Let's add first screen. Let's delete that one. Add Explorer view. Let's delete that one. Feature, some new feature we don't need. Delete that. And the NS, add some feature. Let's delete that. My second feature, let's also delete. And then lastly, the releases, we're just going to delete here. We're going to talk about releases in a future video. So I want to delete these, but I actually can't right now. I'm going to restart Xcode. Maybe that will solve. If I restart Xcode and open back up repos, yeah, those folders are gone. We did not delete feature and Explorer view from the remote repo. So let's also go ahead and delete that. So it's deleted from the remote repo. It looks like it deleted, but it looks like Xcode did not update. From time to time, Xcode does get buggy. So we can either restart Xcode or you can click refresh file status, and that should update your code. I'm back now on the main branch. So in this video, we learned about branching and we learned about merging, but we didn't have any merge conflicts. So you can imagine a situation where you try to merge and then it conflicts with other changes that have already been committed. So there's a whole realm that we need to discuss about conflicts. So all of these had no conflicts. They were very easy to merge. But in the next video, we're going to take us to the next level and talk about some of those conflicts. Thank you guys for watching. As always, my name is Nick. This is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.